Hey folks, I'm Jack Fossett, and welcome to this demo and review of this beautiful Fender American Original 60s Telecaster. Now, the American Original series is a few years old now, and it replaced the American Vintage Reissue series. And one of the big distinctions that they did was, rather than the American Vintage Reissue series, were based on individual years. So at first there was a 57 Stratocaster, there was a 52 Telecaster, there were various other years, you know, from the 60s and things. And when they switched to the American Original series, what they did was they kind of did a decade's greatest hits, so to speak. So this is not intending to be a copy of any specific 1960s Telecaster, but more taking all of the features from player favorites of the 1960s and kind of putting them into one ultimate all-decade guitar, which I think is kind of a cool idea because I think, generally speaking, I think that's what most, at least, players are going to be looking for. This would, of course, just be my opinion, but my guess would be that people who are really looking to have something very specific to a certain year are going to be more vintage collectors or looking at custom shop pieces. That would be my guess. If you have a difference of opinion on that, certainly let me know, but that would kind of be my guess. And this is certainly a bit of a higher end guitar. It's a little bit more money than your typical guitar. However, this is one that I think is still very much within the player's realm. I think more people are getting these guitars to play them than they are from a collector's standpoint. So let's talk about this guitar a little bit. This has a double bound body. It has the custom Telecaster headstock logo. It has a mid-60s C-shaped neck, which is one of the most comfortable necks I've at least ever played. It has a 9.5-inch radius fingerboard. Of course, it's a rosewood fingerboard since it's a 60s inspired guitar. The pickups are 64 pure vintage pickups. As vintage tall frets, that's one of the things that's kind of a changeover. They're very, very comfortable to play. It comes with the ashtray cover to the bridge, which I don't have on. It's too bad because they look so cool, but they're just so not functional, you know, because you can't, but they look really nice, so it's a shame that it kind of doesn't work out that way. Has more of the 60s style little top hat thing on the switch, which is kind of cool. This is, again, the Lake Placid Blue finish, which is just stunning. They also have them in several other finishes, including Sunburst and a new Burgundy Mist Metallic, which Does anybody have a good excuse for buying the same model guitar in multiple finishes? Asking for a friend. Well, the different pigments in the paint lead to different tones. Now, the pickups, I think, are a great representation of 1960s as opposed to the 1950s Telecaster sound. The 1960s pickups were a little bit more scooped sounding, a little bit slinkier, kind of. The neck pickup, they really nailed that sort of hollow, airy tone, which is what I look for from a Telecaster neck pickup. Generally speaking, I think that the Telecaster neck pickup is harder to get right than the Telecaster bridge pickup. And once again, I'm sure people might have a difference of opinion on that, but with the Telecaster bridge pickup, which is more probably the sound people think of with a Telecaster, right? That big, fat, twangy bridge pickup. The big, fat, twangy bridge pickup, I think, is a little easier to nail because there's a lot of different ways you can get this pickup right. The neck pickup, I think, is just harder to get right, and it should be kind of like a Strat neck pickup with a little bit of the air let out of it. Let's say that. It's hard to describe, but there is this kind of airiness to a Telecaster neck pickup that I really like, and a lot of Telecaster neck pickups are lacking that tone. This one, I think, gets it pretty well, and that, in contrast with the big fat twangy bridge, and then, you know, the play that you get on the middle, I think is really what makes, one of the things that makes Telecaster a really special guitar. Now, being a vintage reissue guitar, you do not have the headstock truss rod adjustment. It is under the heel. So in that sense, it is still true very much to the era. That's not necessarily a detriment. It is something to be aware of. You know, again, I've talked about this in other videos, but like in Maine, with a lot of humidity changes, I might need to do more setup adjustments than someone might need to do in a location where the weather stays more consistent throughout the year. We get a lot, it gets very dry in the winter here, and it gets very, very humid in the summer here, which leads to a lot of kind of wiggling in guitar necks. So that's not something that I'm personally crazy about, but again, that's not really a criticism because it is true to that era of guitar. And it's just something to be aware of when you're looking at these models. So in that sense, it is a little bit more like, you know, again, it's a player's guitar, but there are some things that are true to it. It kind of sits in the middle, right? It's not quite a collector's, but it's a little different than your average player. And I don't say this in a bad way. These are really, really cool guitars, and I like that there are different levels of vintage-inspired instruments. So if you're looking at a really vintage-inspired one, you know, from the bottom up, you're going to be looking at the Squier Classic vibe, which is going to be kind of an introduction to it for a lot of people, but they're great guitars too. You know, you can certainly use them in a lot of real-world situations. Then after that, you have the Ventera series, which is the Mexican-made, that are more similar to this one, a little bit more true to the vintage styling, but they're made in Mexico. And then jumping up to this one, Fender's done a bunch of different vintage-inspired, vintage-modified series over the years. Right now, this is what's kind of out there. Now, for this demo, staying true to the 1960s, I'm plugging into this amp right here, which is my 65 Reissue Super Reverb. Beautiful clean tones with this guitar. In the intro, you just heard the neck pickup. For the overdriven tones, I'm using a Keeley Red Dirt overdrive. This is strung up with Elixir Nanoweb strings. What do you think of the American Original series versus the American Vintage Reissue series? Have you played any of those kind of back to back? I've owned over the years a few different American Vintage Reissue series, and I do find that the American Original, again, I like this idea of kind of a decade's greatest hits into one guitar. It feels a little more comfortable to play, a little bit more user-friendly, kind of bridges that gap again between being a little bit less in that sort of just wanting something exactly more like a collector would to something that's a little bit more player-friendly. Let us know what you think of this guitar in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.